All right, so again, we're talking about Flask. Now, most of the Flask stuff that I showed you in the lecture on Tuesday, I think I showed you enough that you can handle the Flask portion, okay? I'll maybe go over a couple of other small things as we go through this. But basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a Flask-based web service which returns JSON information, okay? So I think in all of the examples, let me pull up the examples that we did. Let's see. So I think it was, yeah, lecture 18. Okay, and all right. Okay, so in all of these examples, we were just returning strings, okay? And did we, oh, I guess we actually returned a JSON right here. Okay, so that's cool. So that's nice. Yeah, all right. So we're going to be doing something like this last example here where we're actually returning a JSON, okay? So we have this Prussian horse kick data set. It's actually not called Prussian horse kick data.csv. I just renamed it Prussian.csv. Okay, and you should be able to download it there on the assignment. So let me go ahead and bring up that data set so we can take a look at that. All right, so let's see. Where did I put that data set? I don't even remember. Let's see here. CD documents. Well, it's not in there. All right, I'm gonna have to go grab it off of the Blackboard. Courses, this one, assignments. All right, here we go. Okay, so now let's go ahead and take a look at this. Actually, let's copy downloads. Okay, so this is the data set. Okay, now basically what you see is across the top is your headers. Okay, and other than the year, these represent the names of the different units of the Prussian military, the corps. Okay, so in other words, there's a corps called C7, Corps 7, and C11. I don't know what happened to C12 and C13, but it basically goes 1 through 9, and then 10, 11, 14, and 15. And then there's also a general corps, which is GC, okay? And so then basically all this data shows you is that for each year, it shows you the number of deaths, and this is apparently real data, caused by soldiers being kicked by horses. So in 1875, you see, there were a total of 1, 2, 3. If you add these numbers up, there were 3 total soldiers who were killed by being kicked by a horse. And they correspond to whichever these corps. So this one here would be C14. There was 1, and then 11, 10, 9. So then it looks like there was C7 and C8 also had deaths. Okay. And as you see here, no corps suffered more than 3 in any given year, but you can see that, oh, actually, no, here's one. Here's a 4 right here. So in 1882, Corps 14 had 4 soldiers killed by horses. Okay. So that's basically how you interpret the data. So if I was to ask you, you know, for a given year, right, 1884, all I want to know the total number that were killed, then you would just add up the data in this row here in the 1884 row, okay? And likewise, if I asked you, okay, I want to know the total number of soldiers killed in a particular corps, years don't matter, then I could for like core 15, then what I would do is I'd add up this entire column here. Okay. So that's basically how you're going to get the data. And then of course, if I ask you for both a core and a year, like if I said, you know, the general core year 1886, then that would be this value right here, the number 2. And so that would just be the one specific value. Okay. So that's basically the data that we're dealing with. Okay. And if we look at the web service, we're basically going to create 3 endpoints. Okay. The first one is going to just be a year. So they're going to type in, or the URL is going to be, you know, 127.0.0.1:5000/year/ and then whatever they type in for the year, it should return the total number of deaths across all the core for the year. Okay. So here's the example. All right. So if they put in /year/1875, it'll print out each core that had deaths, and you can put in zeros if you want, if it would be easier. It actually turns out it's a lot easier if you put in zeros. So, you know, you'd have GC would be 0, C1 0, C2 0, C3 0, etc. And then here are the ones that have them, C7, C8, and C14. And then the total across all is 3. Okay. So that's what you're returning for this year example. Okay. For the core example, where the URL is /core/ and then a core, whichever core they happen to put in there, okay, that's going to do a similar thing, but it's going to return the deaths for each year. And then at the end, it's going to have this total. Okay. And then the last endpoint is going to be the /specific, where you're going to put in a year and a core name. And then that's just going to return you total and then the number. Okay. So that is the web service Flask portion of the assignment. Okay. Now let's take a look at these hints. Okay. So the most difficult thing, and the thing that you're going to spend all of your time on and tear your hair out on, is figuring out how to convert the data from this file, okay, into a format that's easily queryable so that when given a URL, it will return the correct information. And I point out, you're not allowed to hard code any of these names or any of these years into the application. I should be able to give you a different data file that had more core names on here, C25, C32, and additional years, and your program should still work the same, okay? So you're going to have to be pretty creative and spend some time thinking about how you're going to parse this in such a way that it's useful to you. Now, I give you a hint right here, which is I think is a pretty good hint, okay? And it says, you might want to create separate data structures to make looking the information up easier, okay? So if you had a dictionary, for example, called by year, and if you put in by year 1878 and GC, and it gave you the total, then that would be super useful. Likewise, if you did one by core, and then just basically did the data in the opposite order, so instead of 1878 GC, you had GC 1878, okay, then that would also be helpful, okay? Because then it's, you know, if I have by year 1878, then presumably my dictionary would have all of the different cores for 1878 and then the numbers. So if I was given a year, 1878, I could just loop through all of the keys in my 1878 dictionary to both print out what's in here as well as sum up the total of the items that are there. Okay. Now, the other tricky thing is that when you parse the file, you're going to have to make sure that you parse this header, okay? Because this header is going to be what you use for some of the names of your keys, right? You know, so if you were to set up the data structure down here that I'm proposing, right here, the by core, for example, well, the only place you're going to get GC is going to be out of this top header file. So you're going to, when you go to process this file, you're going to need to make sure that you get that first line and treat the first line differently. because if I were to give you a different file and I changed these headers, your code would still need to be able to work. Okay, so that's going to be the biggest pain. And that really has nothing to do with, Flask or anything. This is like this is thinking like a programmer and thinking about Python. All right, that is what the point of this is, and that's kind of why I saved it until the very last assignment. Now, somebody asked, loop through the file and create your variables. I mean, yeah, okay. It's easy to say loop through the file and create your variables, but how exactly are you going to do that, right? I mean, that's the thing that you need to figure out how to do it. And as I say, I would strongly recommend creating these two different data structures, because if the user says they just want stuff by year, having an easy lookup where the key is the year is very, very nice. If all I had, for example, was by year, and then the user wanted to look it up by core, I would have to loop through the entire data structure 1 year at a time, check to see if there's any values there for core, and if so, then create a running total, right? So this is a lot more inconvenient having just the one. Now, that's not to say you can't do it that way. You absolutely can, okay? And in fact, many of you might decide to do it that way, okay? I'm just saying that this is one possible way of doing it, okay? Yeah, so you may not hard code in core names or years, right? So I shouldn't see anything like, if column sub 0 or column sub 4 is equal to C3, right? I shouldn't see anything like that in your code, okay? Because then that's hard coding in the header names, okay? Does that make sense to everybody? You guys have any questions about that? So here's the thing, is it's Thursday today, all right? It's not a ton of code to accomplish what I'm suggesting, but it's a little bit tricky, okay? So this isn't the kind of thing that you're gonna wanna wait to start working on Sunday afternoon or Monday morning, okay? Because figuring out how to get this data into the right format so that you can use it in your API calls, in your web service calls, that's going to be the trickiest thing, okay? And I imagine that many of you are going to spend a fair amount of time, struggling with this and trying things out. So I would strongly recommend you start working on this sooner rather than later, okay? And so the message here in the chat is a good one. Yeah, first of all, you need to loop through the file, okay? And so if you're weak on looping through files, you need to go review the lectures and the assignments and the things where we loop through files and how to get individual items out of the file so that you can figure out how to set up your structure to contain that data, okay? So this is the time now to kind of review that material so that you're ready for it when it shows up on the final, okay? All right. So then the second thing that you have to do after you create this API with the core and all this kind of stuff is then you're going to actually create a tkinter GUI application. Okay. And I think let me see, I might have actually made one of those. I did it somewhere. It's not in here. I have an assignment 11 directory. Okay, so I think it's called this. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do, hey, before I actually run this, does anybody remember if I'm sitting here in this directory and I've got my venv and I've got my app.py, do you guys remember how to activate my virtual environment? Do you remember that from the last lecture? Anybody remember? Something source. Yep, okay, that's pretty close. But you go source, and I'm going to do venv bin activate. Okay, so that's going to put me in my virtual environment. And now that gives me access to this Flask command. Okay, and I do Flask run, and I'm going to do ---- reload so that if I make changes. Now, I guess I don't actually need to do that because I'm not going to make changes here. Okay, so I'm going to run the application. All right, there's the application. All right, and I just want to show you that, okay, I can go to All right, so if I do /year /1875, you see, okay, here's what mine returns. Okay, let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so mine returns this JSON where you see all these zeros, but then you see the ones for the ones that have it, and then you see the total here at the end. Okay, so I should be able to put in any year, 1882. Okay, wow, there were 14 who died in 1882. Okay, so you see the numbers there. All right, if I put in a year that doesn't work, like 1980, then I get back a not found. Okay, and so then if I were to do a specific core name, like I think you do core, yeah, like that. And then if I did GC, okay, see how this shows me the data for each year and then the total at the end. Okay, so the general core had 16. I think there was core 7 was one. Okay, there's the data for core 7. Okay, and then the last one was specific, and then there was a year and then a core. So there's specific 1884 GC. We could also do, 1882 /C14. Okay, and you see there's the data. Okay. So that's the web service part. And then I can show you now, I didn't actually finish assignment 11 yet because I did it in like 5 minutes and I didn't have time. But this is not particularly difficult, particularly if you understand how to do the previous tkinter assignments. All we have is we have a label, an entry, another label, an entry, a button, and then a label. Okay. And so all we're doing is we're typing in things like, 1882. So if I just type in the year with no core and hit retrieve data, okay, then it should retrieve all this data. Now this looks terrible. So I would hope that you format this better than this. Okay. You could at least put in line breaks or something so that the data looks a little bit nicer. Okay. So that's for just a year. All right. If I remove the year and put in just a core, so C7, okay, then I get year kind of information. Again, this looks horrible. And then if I put them both in, 1884 and C7, then I get just that total for C7 in 1884, okay? So that's basically all your tkinter application is going to do. And again, don't put it in this ugly JSON format. Actually, print out a somewhat decent looking string. Okay. I mean, even if that just means removing the curly braces and putting a carriage return in between the elements. Okay. All right. So that's basically the assignment.